When You, the quote-unquote love story about a stalker and the woman who falls for him, first debuted on Lifetime in the fall of 2018, the response was muted. The show, based on Carolyn Kepnes's best-selling book of the same name, was praised by critics but overlooked by audiences. That changed when the series' 10-episode first season hit Netflix. Suddenly, the show became a phenomenon. Netflix tweeted that 40 million subscribers had watched the series in its first month on the platform, and You also became a hot topic on social media. A lot of this buzz was centered on whether or not it was appropriate to be attracted to You's twisted protagonist, bookstore manager Joe Goldberg, played by Penn Badgley. After all, he did have a tendency of getting rid of people he didn't approve of. But the show almost made Joe sympathetic by taking us into his mind and showing us how much he wanted to do whatever he could to help the woman he loved, Elizabeth Lale's aspiring author, Guinevere Beck. The story featured the traditional beats of a romance, including the requisite meet-cute and awkward first date. It also included a lot of questionable behavior and became increasingly disturbing as Joe and Beck's story reached its inevitable but tragic conclusion. So after an intense first season that ended on a huge cliffhanger, where does You go in Season 2, which will run on Netflix exclusively? We've gathered all the information we could find on the upcoming new season, but before we get into it, keep in mind there are major spoilers for Season 1 ahead. First, let's take a look at where we've been and what unfinished business from Season 1 might again rear its head in Season 2. When Joe and Beck first met, he stalked her online and in real life. He learned about her friends, her former lovers, her hopes, and her dreams. That led him to take out two of the people that were closest to her. These are acts that Joe believed to help Beck. Even though Joe thought his intentions were pure, once Beck found evidence of what he'd done, he realized he was in danger of being discovered. So Joe locks Beck in a cage in the basement of his bookstore. He was hoping he could get her to understand everything he did and why he did it. And Beck desperately tries to convince Joe she's on his side by writing their story, but pointing her therapist, Dr. Nikki, instead of Joe as the guilty party. Unfortunately, Beck doesn't win her freedom and instead perishes at Joe's hand. 4 months later, Joe's passed along Beck's writing from her time in his book cage to her publisher. Her posthumously published book has become a sensation. It's also led to the arrest and incarceration of a very confused Dr. Nikki. Throughout the first season, the specter of Joe's first girlfriend, Candace, hung over the proceedings. At first, it seemed like the couple just had a bad breakup that stemmed from her cheating on him. But as we learn more about Joe and see flashbacks to his time with Candace, we start to suspect that Candace is no longer breathing. Especially since we know for sure that Joe was responsible for pushing the other man in Candace's life off a roof. Yet, to the surprise of the viewers, and maybe Joe too, in the last few moments of Season 1, a very much alive Candace showed up at Joe's bookstore to inform him that they needed to talk. This was by far the biggest twist of the season. Not only did it diverge from Kepnes's book, it also went against everything the show was appeared to be setting up. So Candace's presence is the biggest wild card for the continuing story of You going into Season 2. There are many other loose ends that could follow Joe into next season, which will be based on Kepnes's second book in the You series, Hidden Bodies. Sounds innocent enough. First of all, Joe left evidence every time he took a life. He never committed the perfect crime. Plus, at the end of Season 1, we learned that the family of one of his victims, Peach Salinger, hadn't accepted that Peach took her own life, so they launched an investigation into what really happened. There's also the matter of Paco, the little boy who lived down the hall from Joe and who Joe attempted to help throughout the first season. Eventually, this led Joe to take out Paco's mother's abusive boyfriend right in front of him. In the process, Joe became Paco's hero. That's why when Beck almost manages to escape Joe's clutches, Paco refused to help her by opening the door to the locked basement. At the end of Season 1, Paco and his mom moved away, but Paco is still one of the very few people who knows what Joe is really capable of. In addition, there's Dr. Nikki, who is probably strongly protesting his innocence. In other words, in Season 2, the screws could start tightening around Joe, who miraculously managed to escape suspicion so far. We don't know if Paco, his mother, or Dr. Nikki will be returning in Season 2 yet. In fact, the only cast member confirmed to return is Joe himself, Penn Badgley. Co-creator Sarah Gamble told The Cosmopolitan that there are many characters that the show would like to have back, but couldn't confirm anything for sure. But she did comment that, quote, "We're not trying to make life easier for Joe in Season 2, so hopefully you will see people that you like again." So while we don't know if any actors outside of Badgley will be returning for Season 2, we can confirm we'll be meeting several new characters. First, there's Joe's new love interest, Love Quinn. Yes, you heard that right. The new woman in Joe's life is literally named Love. Love will be played by Victoria Pedretti, who was last seen on Netflix's The Haunting of Hill House. Love is nothing like Beck, and her relationship with Joe is very different. Love is an aspiring chef who works as a produce manager at a high-end Whole Foods-like grocery. And unlike Beck, who curated her life on social media and was very concerned with the way other people saw her, Love couldn't care less about all that. Instead, she's created a life that's all about self-fulfillment and living in the moment. At least that will make her much more difficult to cyberstalk. Love realizes that Joe has also experienced a life-changing loss. That brings the pair together, and their shared grief gives them something to bond over. Love has a brother named 40, who will factor into Season 2's story as well. He will be played by James Scully, who most recently appeared in the TV show Heathers. 40 is confident, opinionated, and privileged, and can be either charming or a bully. When we meet him, he'll be going through a 12-step program and relying heavily on his sister for support. But he's never far away from falling off the wagon. There's also a character who sounds like she could be the new Paco, Ellie, a teenager who has been living in the big city with minimum adult supervision for some time. Unlike Paco, though, she's not above conning adults into getting what she needs. Jenna Ortega, who played the young Jane on Jane the Virgin, has been cast for this role. Finally, Gotham's Lord Taylor will play a character named Will. Will has to deal with unsavory folks for his job, but he's actually a good guy at heart who marches to the beat of his own drum. In the second season, all that goes up in smoke when he finds himself in a bad situation. Adding even more to some interesting additions to the cast, one of the biggest changes in You Season 2 will be its location. As we saw in the first season, Joe is a New Yorker through and through, but for some reason in Season 2, he moves to Los Angeles, a plot point taken right out of the book. According to Sarah Gamble, the move isn't by choice, and we'll understand why it happens by the end of the first episode, probably to get away from all the murders. Like many New York transplants, Joe hates LA. But Gamble says that despite Joe's reaction, the show will present the reality of Los Angeles. It will focus on the multicultural patchwork of the city, instead of just the Hollywood agents and starlets that often characterize LA on screen. Joe was pretty judgmental of the New Yorkers surrounding him in Season 1, but we're thinking his judgments on LA natives are to get even more extreme in Season 2. Joe will also spend a lot of time in Season 2 dealing with his actions from Season 1. Joe is having a hard time getting over Beck, despite the fact that he is the reason for her demise in the first place. He's also contending with his guilt from a number of people he took out in Season 1. Gamble explains that Joe isn't cold-blooded, all of his actions are about getting his way and maintaining control. So in Season 2, he hopes that he won't have to hurt anyone again. However, the showrunner hints that this probably isn't a realistic desire on Joe's part. Also, the show will delve into Joe's traumatic childhood, and especially his warped relationship with his caretaker, Mr. Mooney. While we've seen glimpses of just how terrible Joe's early years were, Season 2 will flesh things out even more and show how that background contributed to who Joe became as an adult. However, Gamble cautions that the writers don't want to excuse Joe's actions. Many people have awful childhoods that don't grow up to do what Joe does. Also, for those who've read the You books, Gamble has said that the second season will continue to use Katniss's story as a foundation. However, she also said that while many of the changes from Season 1 in the book seemed small, they will have big consequences in Season 2. So what about that biggest twist of all, the return of Candace? While Candice mostly appeared in brief flashbacks in Season 1, we will be seeing more of her in Season 2. In the books, Joe drowns Candice at the beach after she breaks up with him. And all throughout Season 1, it seemed like the show was setting up a similar revelation about what happened to the character. So Candice's continued existence will certainly change Joe's story in fundamental ways. For now, what that means for the show is mostly under wraps. All Gamble has said is that Candace shakes Joe to the very core with what she brings to the story. It will also have an impact on what Joe does next. Could it be that Joe assumed he'd successfully taken out Candace but actually hadn't? It wouldn't be the first time we'd seen Joe think he ended someone's life only to find out he was mistaken. The same thing happened when he first attempted to get rid of Peach Salinger. But if that was the case, why wouldn't Candace immediately report Joe to the police? It's possible that Joe has something to hold over Candace's head to prevent her from seeking help from them. And from the flashbacks we've seen of Candace, she definitely seems to have a dark side that could be just as disturbing as Joe's. This is one of the big mysteries that Season 2 will unravel. We're eagerly anticipating Yu's return. Unfortunately, no release date for the second season has been announced yet. With all the casting news and the writers hard at work on the new season though, we're hoping we'll be able to watch the continuing saga of Joe Goldberg before the end of 2019. Don't miss You Season 2 whenever it comes out, and thanks for watching our coverage on what to expect when it drops on Netflix. If we missed anything, please let us know in the comments below, and while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to The Binger for more great content like this. Thanks for watching.